Hey everyone! Hi Niket! Hi A! Hi Jeremiah. Hi Niket, can I send my work now to get feedback? No. Because we're gonna go through the community's feedback first, and then we'll have a look if we have time left. Let me switch it over here. Oh, let's drag this down. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, we'll have a look. You know what you can do? Send the link that you want feedback on, or like images that you want feedback on ArtStation, and then at the end, if I have time left, we can still have a look at it. It depends on how much time we're going to be spending today. How does that sound, Aniket? Hi, Nikori! How's everyone doing today? It's sort of been yesterday since we last streamed. Feels so quick next to each other. Get some fresh air in here. Let's actually first chat a little bit before people start coming in. That would be awesome. Yeah, just send it over and I can have a look at the end. So yeah, how's everyone day been? How's everyone feeling? I've been working all day on making a cool little blueprint that allows me to combine meshes with other meshes. So that's been pretty interesting. It basically allows me to so let's say I have a bike and that bike has a couple of attachments. I can then combine the two in a blueprint using sockets that I placed. So I had loads of fun with that. Making magic. Hell yeah, it's been fun. Let me actually see if I can show it off, right? And then we'll dive into a little bit of feedback. Give you a glimpse of the hush hush secret thing that we're doing. Apart from some community members that have already seen it. I'm not gonna reveal too much though. So what would be good examples? Get this one in here. Okay, let's switch it up. Go to the main screen. This is an example, like what I've been using for testing. And the purpose of this is that I can combine like different models with like different attachments. So I can then switch out like all of this stuff to then combine it with like different types of like motorcycles and all that stuff. And this is all based on like a socket that gets set in like the main asset, so we can move it about if we wanted to. So it can be like changed. It can be changed inside of each asset. Is this in the construction script? Yep, it is. Yeah, been working on that. Just allows us to do some like really neat attachment stuff. And then what we can also do, because this is the way, like this is the reason why I actually started building this, let's have a look here. Is this kind of system, right? Where I have like a whole bunch of carts and I have like a whole bunch of attachments, and then I can make like a whole bunch of new cards based on the attachments that I can assign or not, right? So I can change like the box that's on display, and I can change like the card itself. So yeah, it's been really fun. It's been really fun working with this. I got the system all set up. Like the code is actually not that impressive, you know. It's basically what it comes down to is it's looking for the socket by name and then just adding a mesh based on the location of that socket and then just placing a mesh on that location. That's it. And I do that twice, one for each kind of socket, right? Like these bikes only use like one socket because you can see that the display is empty. And then in this one, we have 2 different sockets, which can also be left empty, right? We can just clear this and then we just have like the main. Yeah, that's what I've been working on today. Just wanted to show that off real quick before we dive into some overpaint stuff. Joyce is... George. Oh, sorry, George. Do you have any helpful resources on that? Yesterday I was fiddling with it, but I couldn't find anything useful. No. I don't look at resources, honestly. I just usually try to figure it out. I know that that's not really helpful, but there must be places where you can just get the base, right? Like just the base logic, and then you need to adapt that logic to what you need specifically, right? Yeah, I've been having fun. I've also made a blueprint that kinda does the same stuff, where I look at the amount of sockets that I have on an asset, and then I draw splines between an asset that has sockets and another asset that has sockets as well, and then I connect all those sockets up with splines. And then I can change the drag and like the variation of the hang and all that stuff. Yeah, it's been fun playing around with those. Honestly, documentation and resources for certain things in UE are ridiculously hard to find. Yeah, there must be ways, like this is the way that I usually do it. And hi, I'm Macbar. It's nice to see you here, buddy. But the way that I honestly do it is I cobble stuff together, right? Like, I know that I wanted to play around with sockets, so I started looking into sockets, which is very simple, right? Then I started looking into what code or like what blueprint code is available to sample sockets and what is there. Just by going into a blueprint and opening the menu and looking at what's available there, right? Contextually. And then I saw some options because it allows you to look through an entire socket based by name, right? So you can type in a specific name and you want that. Or you could also go through an array of all the sockets and all the names. And that's what I used for the cable stuff, right? Because I'm not assigning a specific name to all the individual sockets. I'm literally just making new sockets, looking through like a whole array of the sockets, which is basically like a collection of all the sockets in that blueprint, and then just getting those locations and doing the same thing for the second asset that I connected up with, and then draw splines between the two, right? Pretty simplified setup, but Jeremiah is currently struggling with Houdini. Overall, it's been a nice day. That's awesome to hear, buddy. Glad you're doing well. Awesome that you're working with Houdini as well. But yeah, I'll be more specific, or like, well, not specific, but I'll try to be more proactive with sharing resources that I'm using, even though I'm just using like literally like 15 seconds of a whole 10-minute video, right? I'll see if I can share more of that in the future to help you guys out. Sounds like a tutorial breakdown video in the making. Potentially? Become the resource. Well, yeah, it could actually be a good idea, you know? Because I've been playing around with like shorter videos, and I do have one that I still need to publish on the vertex baking, like vertex color baking method that I'm using. So maybe yeah, would be like a cool little thing to post. It's a good idea. I should honestly do more on that. Okay, let's get some tea and then we'll get started. It's good stuff. Okay, so for people that are new here, welcome, first of all. This is like a weekly live stream where I go through like the community work and what they're currently working on. And I'm gonna be I'll try to help out people that need some more specific feedback. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll just go through like the individual's work, try to give feedback based on the context that's been shared in the Discord, and then we can come together and share some feedback. Right, so feel free to pitch in or share your thoughts as well if you wanted to do that. That's totally fine. So let's start off with the first one here from Ahmed Enes. So I started this project for practice and it's been a giant fishing boat. I don't know where the ship should belong and what it does. Planning to render it with clay. So many unique props to UV and texture, but I can go texturing right away if this piece has a good story. It's very pink. Yes, great observation. It is very pink. But that's the thing, right? I think you brought up one of the quote unquote issues, or like for me starting points where I usually start with thinking about the story and what's the purpose of the thing that I'm building, right? Because from that purpose you can like get a lot of information that might help you in like constructing it as well. So I would definitely think about that more in the future, or even like reverse engineer and apply it to this, right? Because it seems like you have like a lot of elements going on, right? But it all needs to be like a bit more cohesive, I feel. Even though the full picture is freaking amazing, right? And like the amount of love and attention to detail in this is freaking awesome. Yeah. What you can... I would start with that, right? Like the first thing that I would start with is like, what's the story? I'm just gonna note that down. So what's the story here, right? Like, why are we following this random person on this boat in the middle of the sea? Like, what are they doing? Like, they're fishing, obviously, because you have like a bunch of fish, and like this looks more like a trawler, right? But what you can actually do is say like, okay, all these kind of assets, I'm gonna push them more towards like something that I want to convey visually, right? What I mean by that is, this guy is a fisher, right? But do they have a family? Or like, well, yeah, let's say, do they have a family? Do they have like other skills? Do they have like a love for certain things? You can give that a lot of character just by doing that, right? You could have like, let me write that down first, right? I'll just write who, right? Like, who is this? And then think about like things that can like personalize this person that's running this boat, right? The more personal we make something, the more interesting the story becomes, because we can then relate in some way to that person running this boat. And then we can also lead into that and make sure that we use that for inspiration for props. Right? So we can then lean on that and kind of use it as a foundation to then start making props that kind of lean into that storyline a little bit. And then we can hopefully make like a cohesive story out of it. Or like at least hints at a cohesive story, right? It doesn't always have to be like straight up like this is a story, like no ifs or buts, right? But yeah, it could be nice to use that as a base. And then give some relevancy to this, right? Like this, for example, this axe, like we're in the middle of the ocean. Like, why would you need an axe on a boat? Right? I mean, it might be like a dumb thing, but then if you tie that in somehow, right? Like somehow he was a lumberjack before. So he has like a lot of love for forests and like trees and all that stuff, but then he got pushed into fishing because I don't know, all the trees were cut down. Just as an example, right? Then you can start looking at like, okay, so we got an axe here. Maybe there's something in the back that also indicates that he was a woodcutter in like a former life. Just a random idea, right? It doesn't have to be that, but just as like an experimentation with it. Yeah. Bran is coming up with a question in the chat. Another question I thought for the boat is a sailor looking for something for specific fish. Oh, yeah. So, like, instead of just like a normal fisher that's running like a trawler, like it could also be like that he's hunting for something, right? Could also be interesting. I think that's the thing, right? Like the story, like that's for you as an artist to decide what you do with that. And out of that, like you get to decide what is the most interesting thing, and then we just need to support that visually. So yeah, like a trawler, like hunting for something, like treasure hunting. Those could all be options, right? Environment things, yeah, all the stuff that you guys are coming up with is very good, right? But that gives you like a foundation of what you can then build like a story upon. So that's more like the environment or like the storytelling side of things, right? Because you brought that up yourself, so I wanted to go into that as well. That you can add some cohesion to the story. Now when it comes to the modeling and the actual visuals of the boat, right? There's already like a lot of detail, which is freaking awesome. Like the details like make this stand out, right? So love the details. What you need to be careful with, and this is kind of what we talked about today as well, right? Because we spend a little bit of time in the community chat. We just randomly bumped into each other. We kind of discussed what the future goals are and what you want to become, right? And you said that you plan to render this in clay with so many unique props to texture and UV. I can go texturing right away if this piece has a good story, right? But I would definitely take this farther than just clay rendering, right? Because to simply, how would describe it? So your goal was to become like an environment artist, right? In a studio. That was your goal. So what you want to show off is that you can do the full pipeline when it comes to stuff, right? And if you only do a clay render, what you're doing is you're kind of showing off potentially, well, definitely modeling. Like modeling and potentially storytelling, right? If you go really deep into it. right? But if you do the full pipeline, obviously if you go like, let's say to Unreal Engine, like we discussed today as well, then you're showing off modeling, texturing, UVing, storytelling, lighting, engine work, right? Getting it into the engine and making it look pretty in there. And that's like the complete package that you need as like an environment artist, right? So I would say if you're thinking about number 1 or number 2, try to go for number 2 instead. However, this comes with the caveat that this is going to take a whole lot of time, and which is basically a test, right? When it comes to such a detailed, like very creatively modeled object, you then need to kind of strip it back down and find ways where you can start reusing certain objects, right? Because that's how we like optimize the creation process for games, is that we try to reuse as much as possible, right? And the reason why I bring all this up is because doing it in like a way where you model everything first without having to think about the reuse, it kind of costs you a lot of time, right? Or can potentially cost you a lot of time. I just wanted to bring that up as well. But in this case, I think it's definitely worth like spending time like refining the story just a little bit so that we have that cohesion, and then thinking about how we can reuse props in a more efficient way so that you can then use that for like an actual portfolio piece that shows off the full pipeline, right? I would definitely say that that's worth it. It's gonna take a while though, because there's a lot of props, right? But it does look good. Hi, iMike3D. How are you doing? ISA in a pier in the middle of the sea. Yeah, potentially. Like if you, I think you're talking about like making the scene more into a diorama, right? In this case, I don't think it actually needs it. Like you could almost get away with just adding sea around this, because this prop by itself is already so detailed, right? There's already so much to look at that it kind of stands on its own, and you don't necessarily need to build something around it necessarily, right? Would be cool though. Or it could potentially be cool. Yeah, so that's the thing that I wanted to bring up, right? Like, you mentioned that you wanted to do the clay rendering. I think it's definitely worthwhile showing off the whole pipeline so that you can show that you can do the full pipeline, right? Especially because I also have the additional context of knowing what else you're working on too, right? And I think if you want to get into games, you definitely need to push it to the next level when it comes to the pipeline that you're trying to show off. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I know this is sort of like non-artistic feedback, right? This is more like career advice, but that's a thing that stands out to me currently. Yeah, because honestly, I think what's already on display here, like the density and the amount of assets and the modeling work is all like really good, you know? Like undoubtedly, like the stuff that's already on display looks really nice. And also the way that you're paying attention to like the smaller details, like this one, where you have like, it feels very connected to each other, right? Like stuff, like assets are reacting to other assets. Like they have like a real connective tissue, which is really good. So yeah, just gonna add nice. So yeah, I would say think about it. Think about your approach. I know that you have other stuff on the pipeline as well. So yeah, give it some thought. And then maybe think about what you're feeling about this, like going through the whole pipeline. Because yeah, does look really good. Maybe the small thing that I can say on the actual modeling work, right, is because you do such a good job of adding those like little bits of intricacy, right? You can definitely push that farther when it comes to like some of the straight lines, right? Like especially these ones, like these quarter pieces, they're straight. Could be cool just to give them like a little bit of a kink, right? So that this one is bent outwards. This one is also like slightly bent as well. But again, that's also purely because you do such a good job on the modeling and giving a character already that some of the other stuff could also just benefit from having like a little bit more character, right? Like don't be afraid, especially on the silhouette and on the big things, to like really push the shape of the silhouette. Oh, here we go. I keep talking about the silhouette and I still can't... Is that right? I have such an issue writing that word. Oh my god. But you know what I'm saying, right? Push the silhouette. Yeah. So that would be my feedback, right? Like, again, just a quick recap. Like, the modeling is already so nice. Think about the whole full pipeline. And if you do, like, let's say if you get this finished and everything is textured, and the care and attention to detail that you put into the modeling is also translated into the texturing, like we discussed today, right? Like your inspirations and the kind of style that you want to go for, this thing is gonna look freaking amazing. So that's why I'm so excited to see you push like the full pipeline and bring it into like a game engine and like texture it all up nicely. There's gonna be like a whole bunch of new skills that you're gonna have to learn as well, right? But that's why we're here, right? Awesome. Thank you so much, Ahmed, and good luck. Let us know if we can do anything, right? I'll put this overpaint, since you're a fairly new member, I'll put this overpaint into the chat as well, like after I did the live stream. And then I'll also link to the video as well if you want to watch anything back. So this overpaint is coming into the community feedback channel. Next up, we got Alex. Well, Alexander. Alexander Orn. Making the Cold War Cipher machine. We talked about this last week. Oh, wait, before we dive into it, Alexander, let's have a look at some of the questions here, right? I'm Max3D. Have you encountered Substance Painter taking forever to load? I'm having to resave a new version every time I load it to perform correctly. Maybe working in 4K, maybe switch to 2K. Yeah, that will help. The better performance comes with lower texture resolutions, right? So that could definitely help. Hi Brandoom, how is it going? I heard a dev at a talk say that if the portfolio shows nothing in engine, then they skip to the next candidate. Or will you say that's mostly true for the hiring team / devs? It depends. So in general, if I were to generalize, yes, right? Because you're working with a real-time engine, and that's what we want to show, right? Like that's what we're trying to hire people for. And especially now these days, you have to think about the amount of people that do have that experience, especially as a student. It's fairly easy to pick someone who does have that experience, right? Just in the grand scheme of things. However, if we go a bit more down into the niche structures of that topic, it depends on how good of an artist that is, right? Because it's if you have to compare two things where you're talking about technical ability and artistic insight, right? Those are usually the two categories that we look at. And the more important one of those two is the artistic insight, because that's actually harder to learn than just technical ability, right? So if you have like an amazing artist that doesn't know how to work with Unreal, yeah, they're gonna hire them, right? Because learning letting them learn Unreal and having them on board onto an engine like that is going to be way quicker than having to train up their artistic insight, even though they know how to technically use a program, right? That's a way more difficult thing to teach someone. Thank you for all the helpful vids and advice. No worries. Aniket, how can I become a member of Discord? You have to go through Patreon. So, well, Patreon or become a member here on YouTube. Thank you for asking. I think the links are in the description down below. If you go to beyondexin.com, you can also just find it on the main page as well. Yeah, let's have a look at Alexander's work here next. So we did look at it last week already. So we're probably not gonna do like a complete deep dive into this because it's already looking so good. Let's get some context here. Just need to mess with the texture of the paper and go back into the keyboard attachment to apply some materials I've applied on the Cipher machine on top. I also think I covered all the aspects that Tim mentioned, except for the screws on the keyboard attachment. Yep. So those were these screws that we kind of talked about last time as well, that kind of don't look like... don't really look like they have like a nice amount of dirt or like dusting onto them, right? Because that's a crevice and that would usually have like dust gathering in it, right? Especially on like older machines. Especially because the keyboard itself is so worn, right? Well, dirty, not worn. You would actually expect some dust to be caked into those corners as well. But yeah, that still needs to happen. I'm just gonna point it out, right? I'm gonna point out some of the stuff that I can tell, like smaller stuff. This also still feels like pristine, right? It almost feels like there's no damage on dirt on it, so that could also use like a little bit more texture work. But the rest of it is looking super nice, man. Like the way that you approach like the layering and how realistic you approach it. Super well done. Just visually like really nice to look at as well. The only thing that I thought of before the stream here was, I don't actually know if you have reference of it, right? But I'm imagining that this thing, so these two holes, they click into like those two pins, right? Which means that you're putting this thing down with these soft pads on here and then moving it to there to actually make it click within those pins, right? That means that we're probably gonna see something here as well, right? Where the plastic or the rubber of these little things is actually gonna give some sort of interaction here, right? Where it's gonna, I don't know, leave a mark like rubber marks or like scuff marks. Just from the interaction between the two objects, right? Because they always have to click it in. And if that happens a lot, then you're definitely going to see some stuff. Yeah, kind of like you're doing here. That's more metal damage, I think, but let's have a look. This is awesome, by the way. Love that. Love all the little bits of character and like the attention to detail when it comes to like the modeling, right? When there's like a gap between elements. So nice. Yeah, honestly, that's the main thing that I could think of was like these rubber marks where you have that, well, interaction rubber marks, right? Rubber marks, so some kind of stainage that goes on there. Going very, very detailed over here, right? Hey, Dakart! Hello, hello! Aniket, hey, just joined your Discord server. Can I get feedback on this live stream? If we have time at the end, yeah. Make a new post on the Work in Progress channel and tag it as feedback requested. And then I'll see if we have time. Normally, I don't tend to do... I do like a little bit of prep before the stream, right? So we'll see if we can squeeze it in. Yeah, but overall, this is looking freaking sweet, man. Great job on all the detail. Oh, it might actually... I don't think I pointed this out last time, right? But maybe like a little bit more geo there? Going crazy? Is that too overkill? I don't think so. The rest of it is also nicely detailed, but then you can kind of see the edges here, right? So it might actually be worth to add like a little bit of geo there. More geo. But yeah, honestly, the rest of it looks freaking amazing. Oh, I just noticed that like all the writing is a bit too small. I'll fix that after the stream. Don't have to worry about that now. Yeah, great job. Great job, Alexander Orn. Awesome job. Getting quite close to the finish, huh? Yeah, Hiram is saying this is looking awesome. I know, right? This is looking so good. So good. Next up, Hiram. Hi. Can we see a wireframe for a wireframe of that piece? No, because Alex. Oh wait, no, never mind. I think we can. This is an older post, so I don't know if something changed. So I'll bring that up here really quick. This is how the wireframe is looking. Clean. That's how it's looking. Clean and details where you need details, right? And still optimize where you can optimize. So great job on that. Yeah, Hiram. Hello. This is the last of your series, right? Like when it comes to your moods that you've made for this. Great job on nailing all the other moods that we've talked about in the last couple of sessions. Honestly, I think you nailed this one, you know? Also, when it comes to the little snow flurries, I don't know. Like where the snow interacts, or like the snow breezes against like the objects, right? Flurries? Question mark? You know what I mean. I think the only difference, and it's kind of leaning onto the last session a bit, right? Is where we talked about the green aspect, like the green influences on like the otherwise like yellowish lighting. I think you always need to kind of search for a little bit of contrast. And I think if I have to give an example here, is that the majority of the scene here is kind of like bluish, right? Like blue greenish. But the way that they get contrast in this one is they actually have these yellow slash like goldish elements, right? And this creates like a little bit more depth in the color palette, and makes it a little bit less flat looking than potentially your version is, right? I know that this is more dependent on the actual assets than on the lighting side per se, but maybe you can kind of squeeze that into the lighting somehow, right? That the bluish green tones kind of still have some sort of like light peeking through with god rays that are maybe like goldish or something, right? Thinking on the top of my head, that might actually not be like the best idea that you can do, but yeah, I would definitely say try to find, or try to go a little bit deeper when it comes to the color usage in your lighting, right? That's like the main thing that I can say from like an artistic perspective. Because like when it comes to like replicating the feel and the actual mood of the piece, right? Apart from the colors that we just talked about, I think you've nailed it on the head. I think you replicated all the elements that make the mood the same thing, right? This one was a challenge. Yeah. You did good though. You did good. I love these little like snow bits. Love it. Yeah, so I would that would be like my main thing, right? Like how would I even note it down? Like color depth, right? Because it's not necessarily about like color contrast, but it's not purely relying on like one main color, but adding like a little bit of depth with other colors in the mix, right? Yeah, that's the main thing that I would say. Otherwise, great job. Yeah. Nice one, Hiram. How are you feeling just finishing this? Because this was the last mood that you tried to do, right? How are you feeling now that everything is kind of settled and that you're kind of done with it? Well, apart from this last bit of feedback. Where do we submit for future livestream reviews? So usually I just go through. I'll show you guys really quick. So we have this channel in our community Discord, right? Where people can tag their work as feedback requested, and then I'll go through it like every Wednesday. I'll do like a review of the people that have requested a review. So I think, let's have a look here. Do we have any new ones? No. So that's the main way that you can actually submit your work for these live streams, right? And then occasionally what I'll try to, but I honestly need to find a better way. Oh, I might. Yeah. Oh, there's like a little refresh that I need to do. No, you're in there, Aniket. I see it now. We're gonna go through that little bit. Awesome. Yeah, so that's the main way that you can get in on these feedbacks. I'll need to see if I can find a way to also potentially have other people join in that are like joining the live chat. But Yeah, haven't figured out a good way to do that. Okay, next up, we got Andrew Whiteman, who is, let's get some context here, he's working on a first environment art project. It's given us some updates. Do I have the latest one here? Oh wait, let me quickly fix that because I don't have the latest one on this one image in the middle. Just quickly replace that. We'll just move this one up. Shit back in. There we go. Right, so these are sort of the latest updates from Andrew Whiteman. It's one overview shot of the entire environment and then 2 props that they're currently working on. So we'll kind of go through all of it. I'll probably start with the props, right? And maybe what I'll do is I'll move them over so that we can kind of look at them side by side. But yeah, great stuff so far. I think I mentioned this before, right? This is a very ambitious like first project if you're doing like your first environment ever. So I'm gonna try to keep that in mind as well. So let's have a look at these props, right? Let's have a look. Overall, the core components are there, right? Like, they are recognizable. The assets look what they're supposed to look like. I think it's now more focusing on reducing the amount of noise, especially when we look at this one, right? Like, it's very noisy. Very noisy, and there's just a lot going on because of that noise, right? I think what you could definitely do here is look at realistic paint and how that peels, especially painted metal barrels, right? Looking at painted metal and how that peels. Because it is actually going to give you like a lot of information on how you can make something look realistic. And also, I don't know if this is the case, but I have the feeling that there is like metal on your paint. Right, so this is because you can kind of see by the highlight not being white, but actually being colored. So I'm assuming that there is like... that this currently looks like metal paint. Which might sound logical, right? Because it is painted metal. But actually, if you paint on top of metal, it's gonna... Paint doesn't react like a normal metal would, right? So it's actually gonna change the properties of the underlying thing. Because paint, if you look at the reflection, this has to do with conductivity of an element, right? If it's conductive, it's actually gonna change the reflection to a color rather than a white, right? So that's the way that I can tell that you've added metalness to something that shouldn't be metal, right? Because an actual paint on top of a metal barrel would have like just a normal white reflection, right? Like we're kind of seeing here. And this, I think, contributes to just the barrel looking off. But I would definitely say like the noise is definitely like a big contributor, right? So what you would usually do with noise or with adding detail, right? Because you kind of have to look at noise in a way of adding visual interest to an object, right? Because people are attracted to detail, and noise is also giving the impression that something is detailed. So what you would actually do is you would probably try to locate like a lot of your damage to the areas where it's actually gonna be damaged. That means the core of this might have like scratches, right? Like a couple scratches because people are bumping into it. But the rest of it is not going to have like a lot of this like flaky, rusted, painted feel to it. I think most of that is going to happen on the edges, right? Because if you this looks like a face almost. But if you think about it logically, the way or the reason why this paint looks so warbly and kind of has that like additional height information is because underneath the paint there's actually water that crept underneath that paint layer and is making the base metal rust, which is pushing the paint upwards, and that's where you get that like very very noisy feeling from currently, right? So what you would actually do is you would kind of build that up in layers, right? So you would have layer 1, which is rust, and then you would have like paint around it kind of peeling away from the rust, and you would have like sections of paint like still clinging on, right? So that's like layer 2. It's kind of like a peeling paint, and then layer 3 would be just like full paint. That's like a very simplified version of paint layering, right? Right. So that's how you also, the reason why I'm explaining all this is because that's how you need to think about the layering that you're doing in Substance Painter as well. You start with that base paint, or like with that base metal, then you add rust on top of it, right? Because it gets, water gets to it, so it starts to rust over time. Then the peeling paint, and then like the full paint on top of it. And that's going to make it feel like way more realistic as well. And you can apply that to the same kind of thinking here, right? Is how is this damaged, right? So was this damaged? Because this has like a very, like this section specifically, right? Like it has like a, it's almost like it's rubbed off. But that wouldn't happen, right? Like no one's rubbing off like a sign like this. It would usually just be like scratches and like the rust maybe getting to it and then peeling it off because it's attached to the paint, right? So you can apply the same sort of thinking on this as well. So that's it for like the noisy feeling, right? And you can add all, or like you can apply all the feedback that I give on this barrel also to a certain part on the axe as well. But I don't want to repeat that too much, right? So on the axe, I'm actually going to focus on one thing specifically, just to make it a little bit quicker as well, is this edge, this very specific edge, or maybe even this continuation of this edge, right? To keep it a little bit short is look at reference. And more specifically, look at the bevels on objects. And look at how curved and how rounded they are. Because if you did bake this down from like a high poly, what you're actually going to see, if we do like a very quick separate overpaint here, is that a handle, like a handle will have an edge, right? So let's say that that's an edge, but it would actually be like a fairly sharp edge. And then the end of this handle would be straight, and then this would go straight down as well, right? And then maybe you'd have like a curve going down here because it needs to conform sort of to the wood. Let's say something like this. Maybe it does curve a little, you know? And I don't know what's happening here. I don't think like a normal axe would actually do this. So you would probably see something more like this, right? Like something very, very sturdy looking and like very straightforward. And then that would be like a little bit thicker. Then that would go into like the axe blade. And then the axe blade, depending on the shape, right, could have like a shape like this, where it's like very sharp on this edge as well. And then same kind of happens here, right? So you kind of have to think about like you have to not think, but like look, right? Like that's probably a better way of saying it, is like look at the objects in real life and then try to translate that to the best of your abilities in 3D, right? But the first part is looking at something and like really observing it, right? And like looking at the bevels and how they work together with the shapes that you're trying to replicate. Because compared to what we see in real life, this is kind of like a very, it almost feels like a toy, right? Like a toy gummy that is made, like it's filled with air kind of thing, because it is so rounded and soft, right? So I'll just add too soft here, right? Just to cap that little explanation here. And then do the same process, right? If you're baking it down from a high poly to a low poly, just do the same process. What you would actually do to actionably execute on this is you have to tighten up the bevels on your high poly and then do the same kind of bake onto the low poly, and then you're going to be good. As long as a low poly like sort of follows the high poly still, right? And then quickly, we're going to have a look at this environment over here, because these two assets that we just talked about are a part of this environment, right? Yeah, overall, it's getting together, though. With a nice amount of foliage. Looking pretty decent, you know? Like a nice looking foliage. Especially, again, first time doing it, so you're breaking a lot of new ground, like teaching yourself a lot of new skills, right? The foliage is coming out quite nice. You gotta be a little bit careful with the blending, right? With the ground. Oh, George is saying that he likes the vignetting, like the natural vignette that you get because of the trees, right? So yeah, that's actually, yeah, it is quite nice. It does a good job of like framing the whole thing, right? Sometimes I do use this myself as well, right? So I'll say that as a caveat. Sometimes I do feel it's kind of a little bit forced, even though I use it myself as well, right? So I don't know. It's kind of like you kind of feel if it's right for you, you know? Like I've always liked to do it myself as well, so it's more of a personal choice. Yeah, I agree. Nice vignette. And it's also just smart reuse, right? Like just using the assets that are already there to create a vignette. Always thought it was like a smart idea to do it. Yeah, like I was saying, watch out with the ground blending, right? Because now there's no blend happening between the grass and the floor, and that makes the grass like it's very attached onto the ground, right? It's not really embedded in it. And also, if I wanted to say something more about the foliage, is I'm gonna just ask a question. What tree is this? Right? And hopefully that will lead you to look at some references. And I think from that point, you're gonna know what I mean. Yeah, overall, the composition is quite good, right? Like, all the elements are in place. Breaking a lot of new ground, like I said. And I will just say, keep it up, buddy. Like, keep pushing yourself, keep pushing up those skills, and try to learn new stuff. Doing a good job at it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate it. Looking forward to future updates as well. So next up, we have Cameron Fraser. We were supposed to be talking about this person last week, but this is for the solo challenge and I didn't have the reference on hand, right? So I just wanted to like update on that really quick. They're working on this little dagger over here. Just mainly asking for composition or like proportions. And I think the overall proportions are really good. There's a couple of things that we can maybe look at, like maybe this curve right here doesn't line up with this curve, right? This one feels a little bit longer. I know we're being very nitpicky. And then actually, it's kind of hard to tell, you know, from the picture that I added. But it might be... Let me see. No, I don't have it open anymore. Oh no. Never mind. It might actually be that this end, like this shape, is not rounded, but it's actually more oval shaped, right? So that the curve on top of it is actually like a little bit flatter. It's a little bit, I think. Yeah, I think the overall proportions are quite good. You know, like maybe let's have another look. Maybe the blade is a little bit too long. What do you guys think? You think that the blade here is a little bit too long compared to this one here? I kind of have the feeling that it is, right? Like this blade compared to like this length. Well, specifically the length, right? And again, it's saying, yup, it looks long and sharp. George is saying, yeah. And, or the handle is too short. Oh, that's actually... I don't think the handle is too short. I don't think so. It's a good observation, though. Because yeah, it's all about proportions, right? Like you could either like lengthen the handle a little bit or like shorten the blade. But I think proportionally, like the blade is too long compared to the handle. Yeah, I think honestly, when it comes to the proportions, that's it, right? I think doing quite good so far, so keep it up, Cameron. Keep it up. And sorry for the delayed response as well. Sorry for the delayed feedback on this one. Awesome. And then we're gonna jump over to Generius. Generius made that really awesome looking phone that we talked about last week. And they're currently just asking for feedback on the breakdown. And oh, there's actually been some responses here. Yeah, okay, they're bringing up some good points actually, because I wanted to bring up some of the same stuff as well. I didn't think about this one though. So this is Jono, who is a community member as well, saying that for the wireframe, it would be nice to make the prop stand out from the background, right? Which I totally agree with now that I see it. But I didn't think about it honestly. But it would actually be nice. What kind of combination could you use, right? Like maybe just go for the lighter gray. I could already do it, right? Background and asset blend together, right? Great point. I love that you did like a wireframe presentation though. It looks very clean, just the way that it's laid out. And also just like this little bit of presentation. I'm a sucker for like clean stuff, you know? So I like this. If you're doing like a breakdown, it might be useful to add a name and then also email, right? The reason why we do this, by the way, is if people save your image online and it goes to Pinterest or whatever, right? It still has your contact information on it, even though it doesn't live on ArtStation anymore. So that's just like a really helpful tip. If your stuff gets saved on anyone's reference board or whatever, right? That it still has like a connection back to you. If they want to credit you or whatever. So that's why we do this, just as like a quick little thing there. Yeah, you just want to keep, you just want to make sure that if people see this, right, that they still can link it back to you and your portfolio. Awa is in the chat. Heyo. Baked 2K by 4K. That's interesting. Why did you have to do that? Was it just to... Wait, what is... No, I thought it was like a non-uniform texture, right? Which would make sense, but you still have it at 4K. But yeah, this presentation is great, by the way. Like, just having all the maps laid out and having it just assigned like that in just like a clear sort of format. I feel like the main thing you could do is probably better signal like which map is which color, right? How would you do that? Because yeah, I'm just thinking, right? Because this green, like I know what you're trying to do here, right? But it's not immediately apparent. So maybe you could do like green here as well instead of like the 4K, and then maybe do the 4K somewhere else, right? I don't know. It's just not immediately apparent. Because of the long pillars, and that way it saves some texture space, I think. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So that's what I was saying, Awa, is if you have a non-square texture, that's totally fine. But I just don't really get how it's going from, like, you're basically doing this, right? So you go from a texture that is 4x2, and then you go to a texture that is 4x4, right? Because we're going from like 2K to 4K. Or maybe this is just typo? No, that doesn't make sense. What? Because what you're saying is right? Like, that's why I was thinking about like a non-uniform texture. Because if you have long objects, it doesn't make sense to have more horizontal space because everything is mapped vertically, right? So that's why you're doing a 2x4K, which makes sense because then you have like more vertical resolution. That's totally fine. I just don't get how you're going for like from like a 2x4 to a 4x4. Right? That's just kind of confusing to me. Because if you do that, then that means that you're actually stretching the texture, right? Like you're making it twice the width horizontally because you're stretching from 2K to 4K. So yeah, this is, I mean, it's just confusing, right? So I think I don't want to make any assumptions, right? But if you did it because you think that everything had to be square, that's not true, right? Yeah, it is stretching. You have to adjust it in Substance Painter. But yeah, okay, so that's the thing that I was saying, right? If you have... Which... kind of a bit of work, but I think it's better quality still. Well, if it's stretching, it's not, right? There's also nothing wrong with just using a 2x4K texture, right? That's kind of... Well, yeah, that's what I want to point out, right? I did it for the first time, to be honest, and that's totally fine because it can be, like, very confusing, right? Because what you technically have to do is you're fucking around with the UVs as well, right? Because you have to kind of stretch your UVs if you're baking non-uniformly. And then you have to export that out as like a 2K by 4K again so that you're compensating for the stretching in the UVs. But that means if you're doing that, you don't have to stretch it back up to a 4K. You can just use a 2x4K. Just to explain that really quick, right? You can just use like a non-square texture in an engine. Like, that's no issue. But I mean, yeah, that's like a whole explanation for something. I think you know what you're doing, but it was just confusing, right? I remember the first time doing it as well. Like, I think I dropped it because it was so confusing. So yeah, that was like a very long way of saying that you can use non-uniform textures just straight in whatever engine that you use. That's no issue at all. Back to the presentation though. I think this is very neatly presented, right? Like the color combination here is good. Like it's relatively clear apart from like the green. Maybe you can emphasize like the different colors, right? The way that you did it is still okay, or is it wrong? It's unnecessarily. Like, it's not necessary to do it. Because what you're doing is you stretched it, right? So what stretching means is that you're always going to lose some quality because you're basically extending 1 pixel to 2 pixels, right? And what that always means is if whatever program you use for it is always going to have to do some recalculation based on information that doesn't necessarily exist from a bake, right? It doesn't mean, I mean, on a 4K, you're not going to see that big of a difference. But if you were to do it on a smaller image, you would see like pixels bleeding in between colors and all that stuff. So yeah, just to keep that in mind. I think honestly, if you just were to remove like baked 2K and 4K and just say like this is a 4K, you could also do that. But I think, yeah, if you're baking like a non-uniform texture, it could be very good to just show that off, that you know that is a thing, right? Okay, moving on. I actually love this presentation here. Love it. I really do. Just clean presentation with the albedo, roughness, normal above it. Super clean. Love this. Nothing bad to say about this one. Here on this one, what I would say is I actually don't think that this is needed, right? Because if you're saying like, oh, all the red stuff is mirrored, that's cool. Like, this is all the information that I need to know which stuff is mirrored. And this, I don't really care that much, if I'm going to be honest, right? So it might actually be maybe interesting. How would you do it? I don't know. I can't really think about what you can fill this up with necessarily, right? Maybe what you can do is just adopt this presentation. Okay, so just take this presentation here and do the same thing here, and then showcase like, hey, look, this is all symmetried. And then just do yeah, do this stuff in like a clearer way, right? Where you say like, oh, red is unique, and then the blue stuff. So actually using the colors and then just saying like, you know what I mean? So we go, red is unique, and then blue. Oh, sorry, blue is unique and then red is mirrored, right? That's the way that I would approach it so that you can see the colors directly. Maybe an interesting one, just because you have your texel density here, could be interesting to show off like a texel density view. Just maybe as a third one, right? So you have one object here that is showing off like a texel density and like kind of a checker map on top of it so that you can nicely see how even the texel density is. And then you have a symmetry unique comparison next to it. That might actually be like an option to fill this space up with like one with a checker map. So just kind of thinking on the fly here, right? So yeah, this could actually be like a good option for... Oh. Like a checker map texel density visualization. That could be an option there. And I think other than that, you're good, right? If you make this asset stand out a little bit more, if you fix some of the stuff here, I think the presentation is going to be quite good. Don't forget about this, right? Don't forget about adding your own credits to it. Yeah. Very clean presentation, otherwise. Good stuff. And then let me pull in the work from Aniket as well. Oh, Awa, that's a good question. Do you add credits only for the breakdown or also for main? Yeah, on everything. Just keep it subtle, right? I think a lot of people do it in like a very big way, but you actually don't need to go that big. I think, honestly, this kind of size is actually pretty good, you know, when it comes to in relation to the work. Like, it's noticeable, but it's not going to pull too much attention for it. Maybe pick like a nice font and then dial it back to like 75% so that it blends a little bit with the background better. Couple of quick tips, right? The question about the metallic, I think I missed it. Let me have a look. Also, I'm not very confident about technical stuff. For example, lately, I've been very confused about the gray values in a metallic map. I hear often metallic should only have black and white values, but how do you do this when it's dirty? Making dirt also metallic, which also feels wrong. Yeah, when it comes to metallic, like, you don't have to go black and white. Because there's a whole bunch of issues that come with just purely black and white as well. The transition is gonna look like pretty horrible in some cases. So there's nothing bad with having like stuff like this, you know, nothing bad with that, because I think it's also underutilizing the complexity that you can get with like dirty looking metals, right? Like, it can give you like another dial that you can play with when it comes to the actual control that you have over the look of an object, right? So why not use it? I think the whole question about like the metallic debate is technically it's not PBR correct, right? That's what it always comes down to. But if you think about what PBR actually stands for, is physically based rendering, right? We're not doing 100% accurate physically correct, we're doing physics based rendering, because physically correct renders, there are a couple of renders out there, they're just not real time, right? I think Corona does it like physically correct, if I'm not mistaken, and some other offline renderers do it too, but they're not real time. So we're already kind of cheating the system, so like putting gray in a metallic map doesn't matter too much. So even in professional production, in games, there's also gray values in metallic for props. Yeah, probably. Like way more than you would expect, probably. There are studios that are more strict with it. But honestly, like, if that's the only hurdle that you have in a development, then you're good, right? Because the only thing that you need to do, let's say on this prop, is just get rid of like all the noise that you have on it and like all the gray areas, and you just clamp it to black or white, and then you're done, right? And that's like a 2-minute adjustment. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. It's also not gonna cost you, like, if that is more of the question, right? If that's gonna cost you a potential job interview, it's not, because it's such a simple thing to remedy that it's not gonna be. Maybe it can be brought up for discussion, right? Where you have a conversation with the artists about it, but it's not gonna cost you your job. No way. And then you got another question as well, right? So the AO might be too dark for certain areas. No, I don't think so, honestly. Like, from the look of the asset, right? It looked good. I don't think so. Because that's the thing, right? If it looks good visually and artistically, then you're good. Because it's also like rather personal too, right? So as long as you think it looks good, then you're good to go. Thanks for the questions, Generous. Good stuff on the presentation as well. Great job. Yes, Aniket. Let me have a look at your stuff. So, okay, I'm gonna do this in a slightly different way. Wait, no, that's not. Okay. Let me just quickly. 91. Okay, whatever. Anneke, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the community, by the way. Happy to have you with us. So this is a current work in progress, right? Let me see if there's like some actual context here. Nope, no real context. Okay, so interesting. It's my pen. Get the chat up as well. I quickly uploaded the stuff to show you. Yep, it's totally fine. Thank you so much. I'm gonna ask a couple of questions, right? And you can kind of think about them on your own accord. Let's have a look. Right, I'm kind of looking at all the stuff and kind of seeing what we want to do here. The first question would be to ask yourself is, this is a broad one, right? Like, what's the story here? That's why I was looking for the context as well, to get some additional story beats. Number two would be, what's the time? Like with time I mean not the local time, right? I'm more talking about like historical period. The reason why I bring this up, the reason why I bring number two up is because I'm seeing elements that I can recognize, right? So we're getting like this, I think this is like Roman pottery, right? Like a Roman pottery. Is it actually Roman? I don't know. Then we got these glass files, which actually look like more recent, right? Like I'm almost talking about, because they have labels and everything on it, right? So I'm almost thinking like 1700s, 1800s, rough guess, right? I don't know that much about this time period, but that's like kind of where I would put it. And then this kind of chair, I guess, is also kind of Roman, right? And we got like a carpet underneath it, which looks quite modern. And then we have this thing here, which is, I think is supposed to be like the focal point of the scene, right? But we'll talk more about that later. This is kind of hinting that the person is a, what's the correct word for it? Like a doctor, right? But like a very old one, like an apothecary or something like that, where it's not with like modern medicine, but like actually using herbs to create like potions, right? Like a herbalist. Is that probably? I don't know if that's the accurate word that I'm looking for. And that's what I mean, right? So that seems to me like that's like the major indicator of what this person is, right? But it's actually kind of conflicting. So I was thinking of making an alchemist cable, more like an old doctor / alchemist. Yeah, and I think that's what we're getting here, right? That's more like the herbalist kind of old doctor kind of sense. However, it's kind of weird because it's almost a mix between. Currently, it feels like you're trying to merge a herbalist with almost like a historian. And I don't think it works. I think you need to go like one way or the other, right? Where like if you want to go with a herbalist, you almost like all these pots can kind of go, right? All those pots can kind of go. Some of these barrels also look kind of awkward in the scene. Well, the short of it is actually, let's think about it in a different way, right? Instead of going through all the assets and what I would remove, is how does this person make medicine? Right? So that is, I think, a very important question here, because if you know how to answer that question, it will also allow you to see what kind of assets you need to support that too. And you have to be, again, very strict, right? All the stuff that's not relevant to how this person makes potions or what he does for a day living, just cut that out and like try to find stuff that's like more in line with the historical time period of this herbalist that you're trying to set, right? So if you're gonna go with a herbalist, try to pick like a rough time area, like a rough historical period, and then just double down on what you want to see there. And yeah, like if we're gonna be really brutal, right? Like a herbalist, if they're making potions all the time, they probably don't care about like a historical pot from like Greek or Roman times, right? Like, no needed. It's interesting that you try to reuse the assets that you made earlier, right? And I think that's good, but they also need to match the context and the context of the scene as well, right? So you have to be careful with that when you do so. And then also, this oil lamp, it's kind of too new, right? So let's actually have a look. Just clean up some of the stuff that we don't necessarily want. I think the glass one... What's your point? Maybe changing textures of the bottles? Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna go there. Like, I think the glass ones can actually be easily saved if you just remove the labels from them. Right? I think if you remove the labels and then maybe pick the ones that have a very generic shape, you could actually get away with it. Because you have to think about like glass work in like very old times then, right? In the time that this herbalist was alive. And it's probably going to be like very simplified glassware, right? Where anything that looks a bit more intricate, like this, where it has like all like the edges, you probably wouldn't see that. So something more squarish like that could possibly work. So I'm gonna add that here, so remove labels. What's important is that you just have to answer the questions that we kind of asked here, right? And then just really look for references that are kind of in that timeline. What you'll have to do is scour like museum websites, right? If you're thinking about like, let's say we put it roughly in like the 15th century, right? Like if we're talking about like a medieval kind of herbalist, right? Or wherever you want to set it in just like the relevant like a location in the world. Because honestly, I think like, well, I mean, in my case, like Central European stuff is probably like a bit overdone, right? So there's probably like more interesting herbalist stuff that you can do with it. Yeah, once you kind of nail that down and you got a time period, then you can start looking into like relevant props that are gonna help you build up like the thing here, right? Like this stuff, That looks awesome, right? Because that immediately feels like it's very old time, right? It's very, very handcrafted. The candles are awesome too because they hint at like a very old school way of lighting stuff. What could actually be interesting when it comes to light, I'm just gonna make a note here, right? Something for you to look up is look into rush lights. That's like a medieval way of like lighting stuff, where they actually use like special looking like holders with like little wicks in them that are dipped in like oil or animal fat or something like that. But they can actually give you like a very specific look. It can actually help you here. But the candles are fine as well, right? Candles work really well here. Yeah, so yeah, think about it, right? Because to add on a little bit here, when like a herbalist makes their potions, it makes me think back at when I went to Prague and we visited an alchemist's lab. And they actually, let me see if I can find the pictures actually. They actually had like very interesting looking a very interesting looking setup. The pictures were horrible though because it was so dark, but I'll see if I can find them anyway. Prague. Have a look. See if I can find them real quick. Okay, so we got them here. Is that gonna work? Yeah. Okay, so I'll bring them up here, right? So this was actually something that they found. This was actually something that they found when they were doing like renovations on a building, and this was completely sealed and intact when they found it, allegedly, right? So this is like all the stuff that was originally there. And you can see like he has like a little smelter oven to like hopefully, well, in this case it's more like an alchemist, right? Where they're actually trying to do like conversion of metals. So they will probably try to like make gold out of iron or something like that, right? So that's why the furnace is there. Yeah, there's like some old school glassware there as well. Like this sort of glassware. Very interesting looking shapes, right? And it's all like handmade as well. And then this sort of stuff. Oh man, you can barely see it though. Very dark, right? Yeah, it's got very, very interesting setup as well, right? Where you have like the shelves that are just made out of like brick and they're kind of made in layers. Yeah, and then you got some like medieval smithing tools to get stuff out of the oven again. Just look at this tower of like glassware. Very interesting look and feel to it, right? And I think also another tip, and what I talk about regularly, is that you can actually, by adding more geometry and making it feel like it's very handcrafted, you're actually leaning into something that is more handcrafted and feels older as well, right? So like all these glass bottles, they're kind of like wonky and janky and they're not like 100% straight. And that's something that you can actually use in making something feel like way older before we had machining, right? So yeah, this could be like an interesting setup to maybe get some inspiration from. I hope that helps. I think that was it. Yeah, so I hope that helps. I think with these couple of questions, let's say this third question here, right? Thank you so much. No worries, happy to help. So yeah, I think these are like important questions, right? Like how does this person make medicine? Or if you want to do alchemy, right? Like, I don't mind. Like, that's up to you. But then the question becomes, how does this person do alchemy, right? Let's say do alchemy. That can also be like a question. But I think, what's the story first, right? Like, what are they doing? Are they just making potions? Are they trying to cure someone? Are they trying to find a cure for the plague? Are they trying to find, I don't know, like there's cool stuff that you can do with it, right? Are they just experimenting? And like that story can give you like a foundation to build from. And then the time is going to give you, like the historical period that we talked about is going to give you like more time accurate assets that you can then add to your scene to make it feel more relevant to that time as well. Aniket is asking, should I change the carpet texture too? So that's the reason why we're asking these questions, right? What I actually want you to do with these questions, especially 1 and 2, they are going to be very helpful to know what kind of props you should be taking in there, and that's also going to apply to the carpet, right? Because let's say we go with the idea of like the 15th century, right? So like medieval ages, something like that. Then you can actually look up like what kind of carpets they had and if they are the same sort of carpets that you're using here too. Because this looks like more of like I don't know, I'm not a carpet maker, right? But this looks more like a Persian rug, right? Where it comes from like the Middle East or something like that. Because that could also hint at something, right? If you say like, hey, look, this is like an authentic Persian rug that was made in whatever the time, you don't even have to say it, but you can see it from just looking at it, and that already gives people like a rough idea of like, oh, that's awesome. So this is probably somewhere around that age. And then if you can reinforce that feeling that people have when they say like, oh, this is a Persian rug, so it must be from that time period, roughly. And then if you start adding like a bunch of stuff that is also from that time period, that's going to give you like a cohesive idea and like a cohesive historical period that you can build your whole scene around, right? So that's just a long way of saying I don't think you necessarily need to change the carpet as long as the rest of the scene is going to match the carpet when it comes to the time period and the style of it. Because it could also be like an indication of the location as well, right? So let's say, okay, it's a Persian rug. What if this is an alchemist or like a herbalist in Persia, right? Then you're probably going to have to adjust the assets and maybe change up like significant parts of the scene, because the way that they made furniture and the way that they've built stuff in Persia is going to be completely different than what we know from like, I don't know, like medieval countries here, right? Like in the Western countries, or like in Europe, let's say. So that's I hope you understand what I'm saying, right? Like that everything can be a possible indication of a time zone and a location. So yeah, as long as it's consistent, like I don't mind which way it goes. Yeah. Thanks for jumping in so quickly as well, and like asking for feedback so quickly and joining the community. And welcome once again. Thank you so much for putting this up as well. This is awesome to talk about. Oh yeah, and also after that whole ramble and rant about like storytelling and time periods and all that stuff, I'm looking forward to how this is going to develop. You know, I love environments. It's no secret, right? So whenever there's like an environment on the screen, I can kind of ramble on for like way too long. So I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to what's going to happen with this, man. It's going to be good. Okay, I think we're done for today. I think we are. Let me make sure that we didn't miss anything, right? Work in progress. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, that was it. Really appreciate you for such detailed feedback. Yeah. No worries. I'm happy to help, as always. As a table diorama builder, I'm in full support of your piece. Looking forward to what you're doing with it. Hell yeah, Dagger. Me too. This is good though. We talked about some amazing looking pieces today, honestly. Some amazing stuff that we had to look at today. I'll say this again, right? I feel like I say this every time, but like the amount of stuff, the amount of creativity and like passion just from all the people on display is freaking awesome. Freaking awesome. Aniket, that's a good question. So when do you do feedbacks? Is there a specific day or time? Yes, so every Wednesday at 8, which is 2 hours ago now in your local time zone. That's when I do it. So I do them on every Wednesday I do like work in progress Wednesday. And then Friday during the day I'll also be working on my own stuff as well. So that will be more like during the day from like 1 until 5 roughly, and I'm talking about like Central European time, right? Like 1 to 5 or something like that. And then this is more like on a monthly basis, which was actually yesterday. We also did a portfolio review, and that's like on a monthly basis for like 3 people in their portfolio. MSR hopped on this live randomly, and I got a lot of great tips from everyone's pieces. Yeah, that's awesome. Glad to have you here as well. It's amazing to see you hop in randomly. That's great. Okay, almost going for 2 hours. I'm probably just gonna head out, you know? Probably just gonna take a chill. Probably gonna keep on working on some of the blueprints that I was working on, honestly. I'm excited for that. Where do we switch on to? Let's do this. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm probably gonna do. I'm probably gonna do a little bit more blueprint work. I think the modular system that I was showing off in the beginning of the stream is actually in a very good place. There's a couple of assets that I still want to add for the Hush Hush secret project, which will be revealed at the end of the month to everyone. Yeah, and then gotta... Oh, what do I have to do? It's probably gonna be it, you know? Probably gonna be it. So, I'm gonna say thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being awesome, and keep up the great work. And also, thank you so much for the good questions and like feedback requests. I enjoy it when people ask questions. That's always awesome, even though my ramblings can sort of spiral out. But hey, that's what you get when you're kind of passionate about something, you know? So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I wish you all a great evening or day. And then I'll see you possibly Friday during the day, or next week, Wednesday, whenever we do like a new work in progress Wednesday. So yeah, thanks everyone, and bye-bye.